If you are a Colts fan, if you're a fantasy owner of Reggie Wayne or Peyton Manning, that was tough to watch, right? This is Fantasy Football, brought to you by Norton, because every click matters. I'm Lauren Shehadi. He's Jamey Eisenberg. You know the drill, right? You're so far along in the fantasy football season, looking for the title. The Colts single-handedly ruining fantasy football teams one step at a time.
Yeah, when the Colts started to pull players in the third quarter against the Jets, there was a lot of boos in the stadium. There's probably a lot of boos from fantasy owners across the nation because that was
TVs.
Tough. Absolutely. You know, you're looking at a scenario where, listen, the Colts had the perfect season to play for, but they're looking ahead to potentially playing for a Super Bowl, and that's more important to them. They wanted to make sure everybody is healthy. Whether or not that's the right decision, that's up to you to decide. For us, it was tough to watch because as fantasy owners and as giving fantasy advice, we wanted to see the Colts play a full game and see what could potentially happen. Now, you see here, Joseph Adai was still successful. He gave you a touchdown, gave you 40 yards. That's 10 fantasy points in the standard league. But you see Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, Dallas Clark. We told you Reggie Wayne could potentially struggle because of the matchup with Darrelle Revis. But Dallas Clark, we still expected to play well. Had he scored a touchdown, he still would have put up good stats. But again, the Jets, one of the best teams against tight ends this year. If you saw our rankings, Dave had him number 1. He still thought that he was going to play well. I didn't feel the same way, but I still had him ranked in the top 10. You can't bench Dallas Clark. Peyton Manning, you can't really bench him either. I was in a fantasy playoff game against Dave, ironically enough. We're playing for third place, which is never the greatest thing to do. You want to play for that championship. But we were playing for third place in one of our leagues. I had to keep Peyton Manning in there because Jason Campbell was my backup. I felt that Peyton Manning in a half would do better than Jason Campbell in a full game. Sorry, Lauren, I know that's a big blow to your Redskins there.
I'm over it by now.
You're looking at a Colts team now that we know what happened in Week 16. If you're looking ahead to Week 17 at Buffalo, these guys are not going to play. So if you need to pick up some players or you have these guys on your bench, Donald Brown, he could be a very good option against the Bills in their bad run defense. Austin Collie is probably going to continue to play, even though it's Curtis Painter who's going to be the quarterback. Collie can still be a good option. And Tom Santee, who's the number 2 tight end there, he's a guy that can maybe step up if you're looking for some help. But I think the biggest guy, though, is Donald Brown. If he's on your bench, you could start him Week 17.
What other teams are benching their starters?
Well, we're taping this on Monday,
right.
and there's a big game Monday night for the NFC that can impact this because if the Vikings lose, then you have pretty much everybody playing. But if the Vikings win, then it's one of those scenarios where you could see some guys starting to bench players. But when you're talking about the AFC, the San Diego Chargers on Christmas night, they wrapped up the number 2 seed with a victory against the Titans. And you're talking about now Phillip Rivers, LaDainian Tomlinson, Antonio Gates, Vincent Jackson, very similar to the Colts. You may see these guys start to rest because they have nothing to play for. They're locked into that number 2 seed. So guys like Darren Sproles, who had 3 touchdowns against the Titans. Mike Tolbert, who came on late in that game, he may have a similar role. He's a guy to definitely pick up if he's still available. And then you're looking at some of their backup wide receiver options, Malcolm Floyd, Legadou Nani. These guys could be some potential options. I don't know if I could feel comfortable telling people to start Billy Volek at quarterback, but again, he's a guy that could see some extra playing time because Rivers may rest. So these are options that could be available to you in Week 17. This happens every year when teams clinch. Their backup options go into that final week of the season and could be good fantasy players for owners still playing in Week 17.
So not only do owners not have to sit some guys that won't be playing, some guys won't be playing due to injuries. And Jamey, some of these were key.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When you talk about Ricky Williams, Pierre Thomas, Brandon Jacobs, 3 starting fantasy running backs. Steve Smith of the Panthers, he's out for the season with the broken forearm. Terrible because he was just starting to really come on with Matt Moore as his quarterback. And you'll have to keep an eye on Tony Gonzalez and this calf injury, although he may not play because, as we know, the Falcons are not going to the playoffs. They might not want to risk further injury for a guy of his age. But when you talk about Ricky Williams, his backup option now, Lex Hilliard, somebody you should pick up off the waiver wire. He has a chance to play well. Tough matchup in Week 17 against Pittsburgh, but he did a good job catching the ball out of the backfield. If Pierre Thomas is out, we know Mike Bell, Reggie Bush, those 2 guys may see some increased carries. Again, we'll find out what the Saints are playing for, but I think you still see Mike Bell get some additional carries, and even a guy like Linnell Hamilton is someone who could be out there, somebody you could pick up. And then Brandon Jacobs, if he misses Week 17, Giants still clinging to Giants are out of playoffs, but in terms of fantasy production, Ahmad Bradshaw, we know Week 17, he may be somebody you can use.
And I see Steve Smith on that list and going from there to Jonathan Stewart. He ran all over the Giants. And are we going to see the same thing if D'Angelo Williams is out?
Absolutely, because if the New Orleans Saints decide to rest guys, even if they don't, Jonathan Stewart's going to be fantastic. You saw what happened the last 2 weeks. Go back to Week 15 against the Vikings, and then now this game against the Giants. Going into the season, I made this wacky prediction that Jonathan Stewart would be the better fantasy running back of the Carolina Panthers, better than D'Angelo Williams. With another good game against New Orleans, he's going to catch him, especially if D'Angelo doesn't play. So I'm going to pat myself on the back if that happens. But I think you're talking about Jonathan Stewart, just a fantastic close to the season, playing at a high level. This is what we are expecting for him for the most part this year. Not 200 yards rushing. That's a lot to ask for. But the Giants fell apart, and Jonathan Stewart took advantage. We've seen now over the last couple of weeks backup running backs really start to help fantasy owners, and especially if you're playing in a championship week 16 or going to week 17. We know Jerome Harrison, Arian Foster had a good game in week 16 finally after the week 15 debacle. And so backup options, these guys help you. And again, go back to the teams that are going to rest the Colts and the Chargers. If those guys are available, guys like Mike Tolbert, guys like maybe Chad Simpson or Mike Hart, definitely Donald Brown and Darren Sproles, these guys are going to help you in week 17.
The Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams thing. Pretty good, because I don't know how many fantasy owners would have known that, right? All right, so fantasy owners at last. This is the Tom Brady. This is the Wes Welker. This is the Randy Moss you wanted for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, after that whole debacle against Carolina, when everybody was wondering, is Randy Moss giving up, and Tom Brady can't get going, he's got this finger injury.
It kind of fueled them.
I think it did, you know, and you see finally the performance, like you said, Lauren, what everyone was hoping for. You see Randy Moss catch 3 touchdowns. You see Tom Brady throw for 4 touchdowns. He only threw 3 incomplete passes, and you see Wes Welker do what he's been doing for the most part this year, but he had a fantastic game, 13 catches for 138 yards. Just what you were expecting to see. The Patriots are so good at attacking an opponent's weakness. The Jacksonville secondary is just really not good, and they have very minimal pass rush. So you were expecting them to have a big game. The interesting thing for the Patriots is they benched Lawrence Maroney after another fumble. He fumbled going into the end zone, and you saw Sammy Morris come in. Fred Taylor finally returns. He plays against his former team in the Jaguars. The running game for the Patriots, that's something to keep an eye on. One of the big storylines we'll be following heading into week 17. But I think you're looking at the passing game for the Patriots. Glad to see them finally back. And if you started them in week 16 and won a championship as a result, or have them going into week 17 against Houston, you're very happy to see this, because this is, again, what you drafted them for.
You are very happy to see that. We are very happy to see you doing so well. That's why you're watching this video. We want a championship, okay? We're rooting for you. For Jamey Eisenberg, I'm Lauren Shehadi. We'll see you soon.